Alright, so you might have seen from my previous video that got the engine running, but there was a problem. Although that looks wet, that's only from filling the oil. There was no oil pressure. No oil came out of any of the oil spots. I even took off the, if you can see down there, I took off the hose that connects to the oil pressure unit, just to see if there was actually any oil getting to the oil pressure gauge, and there was nothing. I turned the car over. That's why there's a little towel right there. I turned the car over and no oil came out at all. So the oil pump is inoperable or something is clogged. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the oil pan off, and we're going to have a look and see what happened to the oil pressure. Well, I don't have oil pressure. So, you know, when you start a brand new engine after having had it serviced, there's steps. You have to check it for spark. You got to get the carburetor doing its thing. But when you do get it running, the very first thing you need to check for is oil pressure. After that, you need to check to make sure that the generator or the alternator is charging the battery. But with no oil pressure, we can't continue to run the engine. We need to get it. That's a critical component, and so we're going to go ahead and start the diagnostics on that. Alright, so for the very short period of time that the engine did run, you'd think that the oil would be, if it was zero oil pressure, that the oil would be spotless. It would be clear, but no, the oil actually has some particles in there, really fine, dusty particles. I think we're going to test that with a magnet and see if those are metal shavings. But it doesn't look too good with this oil. I was thinking I would put this oil right back in after I got done with this exercise, but there's something more amiss here. So let's do a little bit more diagnostics. Alright, so I've got a magnet inside this clean shop towel. Let's see if this magnet picks up anything in this fresh oil. Run it on the bottom. I cleaned this oil pan out before I used it. Okay, well that's good. There's no metal shavings at all, so that's a good sign. Finally caught a break. Could just be this is some solvent or something. I don't know what that is that could possibly make the oil sour like that after only running for a short period of time. It could be blow-by, just some carbon buildup, who knows. But regardless, I don't get to reuse this oil. I have to buy new oil for when we put it all back together. So I'm going to go ahead and get started pulling the oil pan off so we can have a look at that oil pump. That's going to be a chore. Alright, so to take the oil pan off, you have to take all these little bolts off. The ones that are more challenging are these that go up underneath this front cross member. They're really difficult to get to. You can't get them from the bottom. You have to get them from the side here. You can see I had to take my little splash guard, my little diamond plate splash guard off, which that's 4 bolts. It's not a problem. But the other issue that I ran into was that the thickness of that gap is such that you can't put a ratchet in there. The ratchet itself takes up too much space. So I made a custom tool here. This is just one of those things for managing your sockets. They have a little square dealie that holds a socket on, but I turned it into a wrench. It's flat enough to get up in there, and it does a really great job of loosening those bolts. All the rest of the bolts are pretty easy. You can see they're really easy to get access to all the way around. It's just these ones up in the front, because they're, if you're looking at it, they're protected by this cross member right here. but you can get it from the front. It's not absolutely impossible. It just takes a little creativity, and you have to make a special tool. All right, so let's get this thing off. All right, so I want to cover real quick these 5 screws. There's 3 across the front, and then the 2 on the corners right here. They're a bit of a challenge, and so I just want to go over how I was able to handle those. So first of all, you know, I talked about this little flat deal here. This is actually not a 7/16 socket. I didn't have a 7/16 socket that had a 12-point socket end. If you use the regular 6-point end, you have to have exactly, you know, 30 degrees between each gradient, and you can't always get that, right? So by having a 12-point socket like this, it makes it easier for you to just start wherever it is, and it works. So the way that I used this one was for the 3 in the front up here. Those 3 in the front, you can only access from this flat area right here, but you can see there's no room to put a tool in there. You can't get a crescent or a ratchet head in there. So by using this right here, you can see I was able to slide it in from this direction, and from underneath here, you can see you can gain access to those 3 spots. 1, 2, 3. All right, so those weren't that difficult. They just had to have a special tool for it. Likewise, the 2 at the ends, you have to get a swivel-headed screw or socket end in order to get, because you can't fit a wrench in there and you can't put an extension in there, and so the swivel has to be at the end of that socket right there. So those are the tools that I used to get to those most difficult connectors. Again, this is actually a 1/4 inch drive, and I had to put an adapter on that. But again, 12-point socket, so that you don't have to get it exactly lined up in order to get it to bite. It'll bite a lot easier. And these little screws, they don't have a whole lot of torque on them, so you really shouldn't have a problem breaking them off. In my case, they've only been connected for months, so it's no rust on there, so it's not a problem. But I just wanted to quickly cover that. Those 5 right there are going to be a challenge if you decide to take your oil pan off, and that's the solution that I use to get those off. All right, so here's the first look at the bottom of the oil pan. Initially, you can see that looks like there's like a dark, almost gritty substance. I don't know exactly what it is. The oil stays on the top of it. If you let it float, it'll go to the bottom. But if you can see, it's very distinct separation. I rechecked it with the magnet, and it is not metallic. So the only thing that I can come to is it's some sort of a rubber or a hose or something like that is decided to give up the ghost. So my #1 suspect is this hose right here. This is the main oil line that goes from the oil pump around to the oil filter. I still haven't been able to get the oil filter off. I want to have a look at that and inspect it as well. It still doesn't explain why I had no oil pressure at that connector right there. So I'm going to get under there and we'll pull off the oil pump and give it a good inspection. Alright, so there's the oil pump out. You can see it's, if you can hear that. Certainly sounds like it's trying to pump, but I'm feeling some resistance. I'm going to go ahead and open up the inside and look at the little circular dealies. The spindle has a little bit of rattle, but it always had that. There's plenty of oil in there. It's getting around. So this is not a problem. The teeth are clear, so it wasn't a matter of the teeth being broke off and getting stuck in position or something, so that's good. So let's go ahead and open up the insides and see what that looks like. Take all this off. Look at all this material it's just floating on the outside of this. I mean, I literally only ran this car for 5 minutes. I really think that it's the main hose there. But let's go ahead and take it apart and see what the inside looks like. Alright, so the inside of the oil pump looks pretty good. There's no residue in there. There's nothing clogging it up. It's free moving. There's no issues with any kind of resistance. All these components look they look practically new. I mean, there's like no wear on them. The inside sleeve is clear, and there's no obstructions. There's a little bit of that goo there, but that goo is everywhere. And there's no clogs or any kind of scoring or anything that could cause a problem here. I'm going to clean up all this goop, and I'm going to take off that oil pipe and put the endoscope through that and see if we can see if that's a source for all this black goo. But that's where I'm at today. Let's go ahead and keep taking stuff apart. All right, so I finally got the oil filter off, and it was really hard to get off. I don't know if you can see. That might explain my lack of oil pressure. This thing should be filled with oil. It should be heavy and soaked. It was not, because this particular oil filter has like a stump in the middle, and that stump was covering up the hole that the freaking oil is supposed to come out of. Well, Shazam! What the heck? So, I can't believe I fell for that. Well, thankfully I expected to replace this, and I got one that is, I believe, the right part. A, it's taller, so that's good. And B, there's no stump in the middle, so that will also be good. I can't believe that's like such a basic thing to screw up. And I've seen other people do that, and I didn't think that I had fallen into that trap. But there you go, buy the wrong parts and you get the wrong outcome. All right, so learn from me. Don't put the short filter on your MGB. Get the tall one. All right, so I just want to really quick document the differences between the types of filters that you might see presented to you, so you can make an informed decision. First of all, this filter probably would have worked fine if it wasn't for that extra little post that they put in the bottom that shortens the overall entryway length. When you measure that, it comes to, it's touching right there. Okay, so that comes to what? Exactly 2 inches. So, from here to there is exactly 2 inches. If you measure the post, at the engine, then it comes out to almost exactly that same measurement, which is not ample flow, and in this case, completely shut it down. So, the replacement filter that I've got here, let's go ahead and measure the distance that it goes to the bottom here. And goes and goes and goes. Here we go. Okay, so now I'm at the bottom here. This one gives you, oh my goodness, 3.5 inches. So it's an extra 1.5 of depth. Still the same screws, and you can see there's no little stump or anything in there that would reduce that. So this is the correct filter. If you do purchase one of these filters and you're not certain and you don't necessarily have the right measurements to take from the inside, you can see the outside measurement here for the short one is 3.5 inches versus 4 inches plus on the slightly longer one. So you see that the stub that's in there really makes this the wrong part. I'm going to show you the, if you go online on AutoZone.com and you put a 77 MGB in there and ask for an oil filter, it recommends this filter, which is incorrect. So I'll be going to AutoZone today to request a refund, and I also want to bring it up to their attention that this is the wrong part, so that they can make a correction in their database. I don't know if a guy at a store can do that. It's a national chain, but you know, maybe this video will help make that change if anybody you know, picks up on it and sees that it's a negative thing, that they're recommending the wrong parts. Alright, so here's a view of the actual connection at the engine. Here's that 3.5 inch. You see, there's plenty of play for that, and if you go down to take the actual measurement, move this down, and you see that comes to 2.5 inches. Oops, can you see that? I don't know if you can see that. But it comes to 2.5 inches right there. So when I had the other one installed, it was just sitting on the top of this cap, and it was not allowing water or oil to flow through. This just kind of validates and verifies all those measurements so you can make an informed decision. Alright, so here's the breakdown. The oil pump was good. There's no issues with the oil pump. So pressure was being created, but because this was clogged by this, the oil couldn't get through to the oil gauge, and so it was flowing out back through the high pressure overflow into this little chute here and going back down into the oil pan. As far as the black material, I'm going to write that off to a couple things. First of all, this hose is very likely degraded inside, and the first time that we ran it, getting it running, the oil flowed up in there and it got into the this section of rubber hose, and then when we turned off the engine, when we were fiddle farting around with it trying to get it running, then the oil flowed back down, and then once it got into circulation, it just became an issue. I think this is this pipe is done. My decision, though, is to replace this pipe with a stainless steel pipe, and that stainless steel pipe is going to be connected to an oil cooler. So we've decided to go ahead and order the oil cooler, and we'll be able to go over the installation of the oil cooler on the 77 MGB. So at this point, I'm just going to tweak everything and put it all back together. And while I have the lifter cover off, and since I did run it for a short period of time, I'm going to go ahead and retorque the head, and then once we get everything all back together again, we'll go back for a first start and get it all tuned up. So that's the breakdown for this particular iteration today. So stay tuned. When we get the oil cooler in, we'll be able to get the engine back running again, and then we'll be able to proceed with the project. So that's all I have for this installment. Please, if you have any comments or anything, if you run across this issue before. Oh, quick comment. I did go back to AutoZone and replace the oil filter, and not only did they credit back the oil filter, but they also credited me back for the 5 quarts of oil. So that's $25 right there. So the good folks at AutoZone took good care of me, like they always do, and I was able to get another 5 quarts of oil and a new oil filter. So we'll get this all together and everything will be fine. So anyway, just make some comments, like, share, and you know, help promote the channel. And that's all I have for you this weekend. So have a good day.